Yeah. Well, I'll just do the little backstory first to get to this point as quickly as I can. I've been in the holistic health I can't even, we have to call it an industry. I don't like to call it that because I don't want to be part of that industry anymore, to be honest. I feel like, it's not about selling something. It's about finding something that works for you. And in this social media and marketing world, and especially with the last 3 years that we've all navigated ourselves through, we've been bombarded with a lot of fear. We've been bombarded with a lot of misinformation from all extremes. And, a lot of that creates a lot of confusion, and that confusion takes us out of that center of who we are and trusting in the power of our own sense of understanding of who we are, so that intuition, but equally being able to observe the subtlety that's around us, because we're so tunnel visioned in what we're sort of addicted to, whether, that's even, any extreme, we say sort of like even extremity in health, this sort of fixation that, okay, I need to be fixed, and having that belief that something's wrong with us. And a lot of, I guess, what, ZenCleanz allows us to sort of experience is those subtle energies at play, which is nature. And, we find enzymes in all that is living. It's, in Ayurveda would say it's the prana, in Chinese medicine we call it the chi. It's the same, it's the spark, it's the ignition. It's what allows life to even occur. Without it, there is no life. And from that life, it's like, what do we want to add to that? So we've got the ignition of the car, but how we look after that car and all the parts and all the, the quality of the oils and the petrol we're putting in, and again, it's not the right terminology because that's still obviously polluting, but, it's outward, inward. It's what are we putting into what we're getting out of it? And is it sustainable? So that's where the nutrition part comes in, because enzymes don't work alone. We need, vitamins and minerals and fats and carbohydrates and sugar. We need all of it. It's not about letting go of one thing to then go extreme into another. It's about finding those elements at any stage and adapting them with the seasons. And that's the intelligence of nature, and it's the intelligence of what the enzymes offer us in ZenCleanz. It's also what food offers us, real whole food. When we come across an experience where we're showing symptoms and over congestion of the body, it's easy to go into that place of fear that all of a sudden our body is fighting against us. Our body is the problem, and then we're the problem. Something's wrong with us because it doesn't fit a certain ideal, but that ideal is being operating off our same actions, right? So for me, with the Vedic background, I sort of always think there's a karma at play as well, right? We're born into this body in this lifetime, and this is my own personal belief. It doesn't need to land for everyone, but we are born into this body to have an experience, to evolve, to understand who we are outside of this gross matter of the physical body, and the mind. And when we cleanse, when we allow nature to come inside of ourselves, in the appropriate way, with the right, non-harm, and it's got a way of facilitating that coming back to self. So, enzymes in nature allows that of us. We all know that when we walk in a forest, or we're, submerging ourselves in the ocean, or we free ourselves, even if it's for a couple of weeks, from our everyday gross life, gross matter life of the to-do lists, we can feel it. We can feel it in our being, and that's what cleansing offers us. It's that same experience, but in a macro and micro, micro and macro experience. So for me, coming to this place, I've been 12 years in this field of work, first more into the energetics, doing a lot of body therapy. I've taught Reiki to hundreds of students. I've practiced reflexology and studied it and run courses, and then I moved into more of the psychological work, like the, clinical EFT and Vedic counseling and Psych K, which is, subconscious belief unpatterning. And so then I went into that and saw really a lot of value in that. and bringing it towards the clients, you know, not just letting it be this sort of come and have a treatment and then sort of you're done here. It's this sort of how allows that circulation to operate. Emotions can, you know, arise as a result of that. Then we've got some tools for them to work through to help feel that. And then it was like, well, wait a second, there's a huge piece of the puzzle missing, which is, you know, our habits and behavior of how we're eating. You know, we can go and see a practitioner, and we can go and see and pay for anyone we want to, you know, as our money allows. But we're still putting our power into someone else. We're still putting our responsibility into someone else. And that's what I started to notice over the decade of, you know, seeing clients is, where is the self-responsibility? Where is the willingness and desire? What's that sort of that willpower is weakened as a byproduct of all this toxicity, you know, this overloaded and congestion, you know, belief system, toxins from the food and, you know, chemicals that we're exposed to, and then the relationships that we're having, all of it came together. And it was like, but people were still victim to it. They still were in the blame of, well, this is my circumstances, this is my story, this is why it's happening to me. Because we're human and we like to analyze. We like to, you know, for our own safety, we like to get to the core of why we're experiencing what we're experiencing, which is amazing. But how much of that is actually limiting us from, you know, breaking through and going through the threshold? So this is where I started to really start to guide groups through Ayurvedic cleansing, seasonal cleansing. And, you know, and I would always cleanse with them, you know, as much as that was holding the space and going through it yourself. It was just about to show them that, you know, I'm human as well, and I'm moving through a process at all times. And, you know, and I received obviously amazing results because it does offer that to us. But, you know, I fell pregnant. I've had 2 boys, and I breastfed for 2 years for both of them. So for 6 years, my body was holding a pregnancy and breastfeeding. I've grown up in Australia. I was born in New Zealand, and our soils are very depleted over here due to a large amount of agricultural industry being over chemical and not sort of practicing sustainability. So what I do see in my clients, as well as I saw in myself, was malabsorption. As I came to that point of sort of finishing the breastfeeding journey with my second son, I just needed to step back. That was at the beginning of COVID, and I just had to step back and sort of remove myself from the world and just focus on parenthood and just step away from the world and the noise that was being created, because it didn't align with what I believe the body needs to hear or feel to stay in alignment. So I took a hiatus, as one would say, off technology, and we moved up to the Northern Rivers, and I started studying Vedic astrology just for wanting to learn a little bit more and just utilize my brain in that capacity. I had a studio in Sydney for 10 years, which I ran alongside, you know, those pregnancies. So yeah, the pandemic was a great opportunity to step back and reset. So I did that. And when I studied Vedic astrology, it just led me down this train of mineral deficiencies and seeing it in people's charts and being able to then look at, you know, our karmas and why we're having these health experiences and what they're allowing us here to learn about ourselves karmically, and whether or not we're going to repeat that cycle, you know, how long this experience is going to go on for, and how can we transcend, you know, even being attached to all of this. So it offered up a lot of questioning of, you know, what I'd learned to date, and an unraveling of what I thought I knew around, you know, healing and health. And so, yeah, for 3 years, I pretty much went back into study and studied with my teacher in Canada, who basically does mineral deficiency, remineralizes, and does it through facial analysis. And he's got 30 years of kinesiology, herbology, naturopathy, orthomolecular medicine. And just through his practice and being hands-on clients, he started to see that symptoms sat under an umbrella of deficiencies, and that they can only be a byproduct of the body not having these nutrients to utilize the function. So I studied with him. Thankfully, he was teaching because of the pandemic, and he knew that he just needed to start to teach practitioners. So I was blessed enough to to be taught by him and guided in a way that I could start to implement that in with my clients. So, you know, that then unraveled, okay, so this malabsorption, and then the question, what if we didn't have these enzymes? Yeah, what if we didn't have these minerals formulations that are the perfect formulation, that bypass the digestive system, that get up into the cell because they follow the formula for it to happen, because nature has that formula. But we're sort of synthesizing this formula in a man-made practice. It's still nature, but it still requires us at the whim of someone else to continue to sell these products. And that really sort of got me thinking, what if we don't have access to any of this? What if you didn't have access to the hospital? What if you didn't have access to your doctor? Where is our sovereignty of health? You know, and that is only in our own self-responsibility and empowerment of understanding how the body functions, understanding bacteria and parasites and fungal, and, you know, what do fats do? What do carbohydrates do? What do sugars do? You know, what do enzymes do? And why do we need them in the body? And this is sort of what led me to ZenCleanz, because it was like, okay, I know that enzymes are the manual workers of the body. I know that without them, these metabolic functions do not start. There's no spark, but also without the minerals and the vitamins and the nutrition, we don't have the fuel to fully allow those enzymes to complete their job, you know, and that's just in my point of view from what I understand in the rabbit hole that I've been down. So that's what's brought me to ZenCleanz, because I was like, well, surely we have a powerhouse of enzymes already out there. Someone's done this already. Just like I said with my teacher, Tim, like someone's already done this. They've had to, you know, someone's already read all these books. And sure enough, I came across Zuman and, you know, and the enzymes, and was like, right, I've got to try all of this and see what it feels like firsthand. So, and it was the perfect timing, like always. You know, I started with the colon. I'd already done a lot of liver and gallbladder, doing the Epsom salt method, understanding magnesium sulfate through the minerals. I understood the sort of the deficits that come with that and how to mitigate that as well with clients. However, having that experience with the enzymes was a very different experience to having it with the magnesium sulfate. I still yield great results. And it's hard to say because you can't compare one to another, because I'm not the same, you know, I'm not the same of what I was detoxing 1 year ago to what I'm now. I just completed 9 days of doing a colon and 2 back-to-back forgives, and doing a back-to-back forgive, they're not the same, you know, everything's very different, even though it's only 1 day apart, 2 days apart. So it's just sort of experimenting and feeling it on for size, because my experience will not be what everyone else has. It won't be. It's the same what I witness clients going through a remineralizing program and, you know, changing the lifestyles and their food habits and how they eat and when they eat and giving their digestion rest. And they're very simple changes that yield phenomenal results. You know, I'm not reinventing the wheel here. I'm just bringing some understanding on how to yield better results with what you're doing so that we can get the body fast-tracked. It doesn't need to take 10 years, you know, to heal. It really doesn't, but it does require our commitment. So when I did the colon cleanse, from moving up to this very humid environment, I started to notice. So what I did when I stopped breastfeeding, I realized that I had a mouthful of amalgam fillings from a childhood, okay? And they cost a lot, obviously, to replace. So I'd been saving my money I have 8, just for reference. I had 8 of them from childhood, which are mineral deficiencies and other gut stuff in itself, and we won't go down this line. Again, all in lessons of learning to help better, you know, walk other people through it. I had remineralized, helped with the malabsorption, started to work on the acidity and inflammation before getting the amalgams taken out. And I write this actually in my story on my website, which is about to launch again, about that the moment that we say I should have is the moment we know that karma is at play. The should have is always, it was always meant to be, you know, and allowing that should have to be let go into leaning into the lessons and the evolution that was allowing me to really find ZenCleanz and also dive a little bit deeper into my habits and things that I weren't letting go of. You know, the little cruxes that were actually exacerbating the imbalances also in the body. So I went about and had my first extraction with a holistic dentist, which was all well and good. It was all done correctly. They used a hammock. They used all the equipment. I was already working through supporting the body to detox anything that was excess coming through the body. The immune system will always have a response to surgery like that, you know, so I was very conscious of that at the time. 8 weeks later, I had my second extraction, and I'm lying there and I'm thinking, whoa, oh, is he taking the fillings out? Because he doesn't have the hammock in. Oh, he must just be cleaning first or doing something else first. So my mind is telling me another story, and yet my intuition's saying he hasn't put the hammock in. And then before I've even come to, and he's sort of cleaning up the mouth and doing everything, I come out and I'm sort of like, but I don't say anything. And I'm not a person not to say anything. And I walk away and thought, that's really weird. Okay, that's really weird. So anyway, I carried on my protocol of trying to clear everything out and support the body with the extractions. But it just wasn't good enough. You know, my liver was already overloaded from years of heavy metals. And as much as I've done cleanses before, not to the degree that's required. You know, I'm 40 years of age. You know, I've got 40 years of living, you know, behind me, and I've lived well, you know. So I just really understood that after that point, 8 weeks later, I started to get a rash underneath my eyes. And long story short, we had a huge floods here in Australia at the beginning of last year. And the floods came, a lot of humidity, a lot of fear, a lot of stress, a lot of holding space. It was just a lot of people losing everything around you. It was disaster. And through that, you know, this rash just started to move. It's just like moved across my eyes. It wouldn't go away. It didn't matter sort of what I did or didn't do. It was just, my body was just in hyper response. It then moved around my nose, and this is when I understood it to be perioral dermatitis, which is a byproduct of, you know, as we know, congested liver and, you know, the microbiomes being compromised. And that's exactly, so then not only that is that every food became almost, I was like having an autoimmune response to food because my microbiome had been completely annihilated within the span of 2 months from this sort of methyl mercury that would have been going through. But it wasn't just that, you know, my body wasn't to the full, like I hadn't done the sort of cleansing that I've done now leading into that. You know, it would have been interesting to see how my body would have responded had I done all of this deeper cleansing, you know, but it is what it is. And I walked through that experience, thankfully, armed with information and understanding of the body, and took the steps that it required to really start to give my body the break it needed to heal, and to listen to my body at what it needed at any time. And so this is sort of where ZenCleanz came into place. It's sort of came in at the time of healing and, you know, clearing the mucoid plaque, strengthening the digestive tract, clearing out the liver, and then working topically on my skin as well. You know, because the microbiome on the face, when you have the perioral dermatitis, becomes so fragile. You become very oversensitive to all of the elements. If it's a windy day or it's a dry day, it flares up. If you eat food within half an hour when it's sort of making its way into the small intestine, you knew within seconds that food was just not going to be okay. And this is where self-muscle testing, you know, plays a big role in understanding what the body needed so that we could minimize and mitigate the flare-ups. But it was 4 months of, you know, really digging deep again and again, and, you know, and digging deep, still looking after children, you know, 3 and 5 year old at that time. There's 6 and 3 now, running a business, still tending to the home. So, you know, I didn't have the luxury to go away and do these cleanses. You know, life doesn't allow me to do that. But at the same time, I feel like being able to cleanse in an environment where you have the greatest triggers for you is probably the greatest growth that we can ever have or ask for. And it was almost like each cleanse offered a new reflection of that which wasn't healed inside of me. And, you know, and having children and knowing that a lot of that is from my inner child as well, is just a remarkable experience to do alongside of that, and knowing and seeing that you are cleansing and we don't need to respond in that way to our children. So it was finding that balance between processing and then showing up, processing and showing up. And I had to find that balance constantly whilst cleansing, you know, process, then show up, and just being able to communicate what I needed through all of that. And, you know, I feel like it's a really important message for anyone cleansing, is that we're not going to be able to tap out of life, you know, and life is going to present us with what we needed, what we need to feel to trigger that we're hiding the feelings from, that we're hiding most from. So that's what I've found most remarkable through the cleansing and the enzymes as well. You know, we can't sort of put the maintenance enzymes to the side because they have another role to play in our everyday life. But the cleansing, like when that mucoid plaque, I had a really productive first cleanse, because potentially the work that I've done, potentially the readiness, you know, the body will only let go of that in which it's ready. And I was very ready to let go. So what came out was just a lot of dampness, a lot of congestion, a lot of all the excess environment that I'd been in for the last, 2 years, that my body couldn't find balance to, because I was so used to living in that sort of drier environment that we were speaking to earlier, that my habits hadn't caught up yet with changing, even with the knowledge that I have around, the 6 tastes and balancing out our foods and changing our, habits in accordance with our environment. That doesn't change that mentality that we just get used to what we get used to. So I feel like going through the mercury toxicity, which led to then the puerperal dermatitis, which then led to basically having a hyperimmunity to everything, made me really look at those edges of myself that I didn't want to soften, and also the habits that I was holding on to. And I needed to sit with, okay, what do they represent to me? What does that chai represent to me? And it's like, oh, it's my only, break that I get from X, Y, or Z, insert whatever it is. And I'm just like, well, Prue, is that true? Like, really? Is that really true for you? And just being able to unpack all of that is remarkable, because my body couldn't take it. My body just said no. And if I even dared to have an inkling of black tea, it responded in such a way that was going to be, problematic for the next couple of days. So, it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it. So I needed to go through that physical experience to get to that place of integrity in myself, especially as a practitioner. I feel like it's really important. If I'm going to ask something of my clients, I need to be willing to really show up in that space myself. So yeah, that's sort of the nutshell of ZenCleanz. And, really what got me to that was the deeper push, which was, okay, this isn't just going to happen overnight. But in fairness, if you consistently move through a cleanse, I'd say like 100 days to 120 days of really like saying yes to yourself, you can clear so much. And I've got photos, and I show this on my website, which you'll be able to see, of literally my journey from malabsorption to, a photo that I'd taken plus the mercury poisoning in between. And it just shows like an 18-month cycle of variables, but how our skin and our face and our eyes and it does not lie. The body does not lie. Every line, every wrinkle, every coloring, every blemish is telling a story of what our organs are doing. And they go away as the organs heal. It disappears. Like it's remarkable.
Before.
Look, as soon as I started taking the protocol of enzymes, let's even just go from before that. I feel like the intention, the seed that's planted when you decide to do something and you follow through with your actions, like it's there, it's already done, even before I've even put it into my mouth, it's done. So that alone catalyzes everything, it sort of like brings everything on board to then start the process before I've even literally taken my first, enzyme powder. That's what I could feel already, just the catalyzing of, it's like every cell in my body was saying, yes, 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 you know, let's do this. This is what we need. This is what's going to yield, you know, what you need at this time. So that was sort of the first awareness of something big is about to happen. And so as I moved through the cleanse itself, you know, even before I've had the release, as the day was building on, I could start to see a build up of, yeah, I'm like, yeah, cool, everything's moving through. And then boom, a situation occurred, which then obviously brought up an experience or a feeling inside of me that was, I just wanted to like, hey, this isn't the time, you know, wanted to avoid at all costs. And then all of a sudden it was like, no, it's in my face. It does not want to go away. And every part of me was that little girl, like shutting herself in the room saying, this isn't the time, please go away, please go away, please go away. And it was just kept coming into my face. And it was like, right, okay. But at the same time, I was so conscious of how I wanted to react in that situation. So let's call it more of an action, that, you know, in my response to, you know, the individual, I didn't want to go into blame or projections or, you know, or devalue what they were saying, but just because what I'm going through at that moment. So I was very, very conscious of that. So I didn't feel unstable whilst taking the enzymes. Whereas some other cleanses I've done, I could have been erratic, and because you're not feeding the body sometimes through that stage, and it can be, like you said, like the oxidative stress and the dryness that comes with not, you know, feeding the body. Like there's just so many things that can agitate the nervous system. Where I didn't feel agitated, I could actually lean into that experience, say and be clear around what I wanted to say about how that situation made me feel and what I needed in that moment. And then once that sort of passed, I could then sit with that same experience and go, right, Prue, where else have you had this? Okay, and then it took me back to another experience. And I guess I value the 12 years of tools that I've gathered along the way, and being able to unpack that, because not everyone has that, and I appreciate that. But it is something that's available to us to do, is that whatever's showing up in the cleanse in that moment is just that sort of, that holographic resonance of what's occurred for you. So it was like, when have I had this feeling before of wanting to shut away or to push away because I didn't know what to say, or I didn't feel like what I had to say was going to help, you know? And it was like, boom, I was straight there, and I could just allow all those feelings to come through without analyzing it, without making a story around it, just let the feelings be felt. And then just let it subside. And that literally all took place before I'd even taken my last enzyme for that night. And the following day is when I had all of that mucoid plaque just like come away. That particular time I had another release, huge mucoid plaque come away. But the relief, the spaciousness was made that much sweeter because I'd already had the emotional. Yeah, I didn't resist. And so when all of that came away, it was like a freeing. It was like my whole energy system felt free. And the next day I had another release. The next day I had another release that was a lot darker. And the next day I had another release that was even more darker. There was no restriction. There was no resistance. There was no feeling of that in my body around all of that. And that sort of allowed me to move into the forgive cleanse with that forgiveness already, you know, that feeling was already there. But what was most interesting was the second forgive that I did off the back of that, because I like to do 2 forgives after a colon. I like to sort of take the opportunity to do 2. And that went into another subtlety of like what was sort of presenting itself in the colon cleanse, another sort of layer to it. And that allowed it to be seen and another feeling to be felt around that. So it wasn't that separate to the feeling or the incident, but it was another subtlety of the layering of it, what showed up. And that even took place, you know, when I started to introduce food back in again, you know, like broths and some juices. It was still moving through me, you know, it hadn't completed itself. 2 days in, it was like the enzymes are still working, you know. I hadn't taken any other enzymes since that, and was just utilizing just the food.